It's October 1929 and banks are locking their doors across America. In a single week, the New York Stock Exchange erases nearly $30 billion in market value, roughly equivalent to the entire federal budget for the previous decade. By 1933, roughly 9,000 American banks have closed, wiping out the savings of millions of ordinary families who had done everything right and still lost everything. But just a few hundred miles west of Wall Street, in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, a different kind of economy is functioning without interruption. The Amish didn't have a Federal Reserve. They had no crop insurance underwritten in Washington, no access to emergency credit lines, and no interest in them either. What they had instead were 3 unwritten financial principles that had been refined across nearly 200 years of settlement. And those principles turned out to be precisely the architecture that a collapsing industrial economy had forgotten to build. Today, we're looking past the buggy to understand how zero-leverage farming, peer-to-peer insurance, and a shadow barter network allowed the Amish to effectively ignore the worst economic disaster in American history. The first principle is the one that outsiders find the most difficult to fully appreciate. Because it isn't a strategy, it's a prohibition. By the early 20th century, most Amish communities had internalized a practice against carrying mortgage debt on farmland. This wasn't purely theological. It was generational memory encoded as economic practice. Records from Lancaster County land transactions in the 1910s and 1920s show that Amish farm purchases were overwhelmingly completed in full, often through multi-generational family arrangements, where an elder family transferred land to a younger one through direct payment rather than bank financing. When the agricultural credit bubble burst in the early 1930s, and it did burst brutally, with over 6,000 rural American banks closing. Between 1930 and 1933, Amish farms had no bank holding paper on them. There was no lender to call in the note. The non-Amish rural farmers who had borrowed to modernize, to purchase tractors, to expand acreage on credit, found themselves cash poor and debt heavy at exactly the moment cash disappeared. The Amish farmer who had resisted the tractor loan in 1925 and endured the mockery of his English neighbors looked, by 1932, like the most conservative financial strategist in the county. Staying out of debt is a reasonable principle in good times, but it still doesn't protect you from the specific disaster that nearly ended hundreds of Amish farms in the 1930s. A single catastrophic event that no individual family could absorb alone. Before we get into the genius of their localized insurance model, if you want to see more mini documentaries on the hidden history of how things work, subscribing is the best way to support the channel. In the winter of 1934, a fire moved through a Lancaster County barn in under 40 minutes. The structure, the equipment inside, and the grain stores were gone before neighboring farms could respond. For a family whose entire operation depended on that barn, for storing feed, sheltering livestock through a Pennsylvania winter, and securing the harvest, this wasn't a setback. It was potentially the end of the farm itself. The family did not file an insurance claim because they carried no insurance policy. Within 2 weeks, that barn had been rebuilt, not by a contractor, not by a government relief agency, and not with borrowed money. The Amish barn raising is the piece of their economy that modern observers find most charming, and therefore most consistently misunderstand. It is often framed as a beautiful community ritual, and it is. But underneath the ritual is a functioning insurance mechanism of remarkable sophistication. Every family that shows up with tools and labor is making a deposit into a mutual fund that pays out in timber and hours rather than dollars. The economic function is nearly identical to a mutual insurance pool, but with several structural advantages that a commercial insurer cannot replicate. There is no premium. There is no claims adjuster. There is no gap between catastrophe and response, because the community's response to the catastrophe is the policy itself. Historians who have studied mutual aid organizations among immigrant communities in the 1930s have noted that the Amish version was distinguished by its mandatory social participation. In most voluntary mutual aid societies, the free rider problem eventually degrades the system. Individuals consume benefits without contributing proportionally. In Amish communities, participation in barn raisings and community labor was not optional in any functional sense. A family that consistently failed to show up would find the informal network of credit, the help with harvest, the shared equipment, the barn, raising itself, quietly unavailable when they needed it. It took the federal government years to draft the New Deal into legislation. The Amish already had their version memorized and had been running it continuously since the 1720s. If you're finding this history as remarkable as it is, dropping a like on the video helps the channel keep making content like this. And now let's talk about the piece of their economic system that almost no one outside academic agricultural history has noticed. By 1933, cash had become genuinely scarce in rural American counties. The M1 money supply, the actual circulating currency and demand deposits in the American economy, contracted by roughly 30% between 1929 and 1933. For communities dependent on cash transactions, this wasn't a financial inconvenience. It was a threat to survival. The Amish relationship with cash had always been minimal, which positioned them unexpectedly well for exactly this crisis. Within Amish communities, a dense web of non-cash exchange had been operating continuously since settlement. A wheelwright in one township received grain from a farmer in the next. A midwife's services were offset against a season of cheese. A family with a particular strength in carpentry exchanged labor against a neighbor's surplus in draft animals. None of these transactions appeared in any county economic record. They required no dollar amount to clear. When the cash economy effectively seized up in 1931 and 1932, these parallel exchange networks simply absorbed the load. Economists studying community resilience during the 1930s have noted that the communities with the strongest informal exchange networks suffered the smallest measurable drops in living standards, even when their cash income declined significantly. The Amish barter economy wasn't a fallback. It was the primary system, and cash was always the supplement. There's a version of this story that ends with a simple lesson. Borrow nothing. Help your neighbors avoid the stock market. But the honest accounting of what the Amish built also requires acknowledging its costs. The same social enforcement that made the mutual aid system function without free riders also made it function without exits. A family that dissented from community norms, that wanted to educate a child past the 8th grade, or adopt a medical technology the community had rejected, or simply move, faced not just social disapproval but the potential loss of the entire financial safety net their family had contributed to for generations. The zero-leverage economy required the forfeiture of individual financial mobility. The peer-to-peer insurance required participation that could not be opted out of. The barter network required geographic and social density that made leaving extraordinarily costly. These are not minor qualifications. They are structural features of a closed economic system, and understanding them is essential to understanding what the Amish actually built, which was not a system designed for export, but a system designed for permanence within a specific, committed community. What it demonstrates, regardless of its portability, is that decentralized mutual obligation can produce economic stability at the community level that no individual savings account and no distant federal program can fully replicate. The New Deal, for all its ambition, was designed to save an economy that had already failed. The Amish economy didn't need saving in 1933 because it had been engineered, generation by generation, not to fail in the first place. Their Depression-era survival was built entirely on agriculture and community obligation. But that same community has spent the last 50 years building something that will genuinely surprise you. If you want to understand how the Amish now dominate the high-end American furniture market, using pneumatic engineering instead of electricity, and why their manufacturing model is attracting the attention of industrial economists, click the video on your screen right now.